Breaking the cycle to step forward. Authentic conversations from lived experience and a professional perspective in overcoming abuse with Chris Tuck and Beverley Ann.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Breaking the Cycle to Step Forward podcast with myself, Chris Tuck, and my lovely co-host,
Beverley Ann. Lovely to see you all.
And today we've got an amazing guest, Mark O'Sullivan, who has written, well, I'll let you tell them, Mark. Introduce yourselves for us, and then we're going to really talk to you in depth about your sitcom.
Okay, so I guess you're referring to my Channel 4 documentary and sitcom, My Sexual Abuse, the sitcom.
We are indeed.
The most accurately named thing on television, I would say, because it is me talking about and exploring the sexual abuse that I suffered or survived. And it's also me making a sitcom about it because I come from a TV comedy background.
Now, when I first saw the title of the sitcom, and you know I wrote a blog, and that's how I contacted you, because I wrote a blog about your sitcom, I found it really hard to imagine how child sexual abuse could be the subject of comedy. So what was your thought process behind that? Can you explain?
Yeah, I think I can. Well, if I'm being really honest, I didn't set out originally to make a comedy. I wanted to make a documentary.
Right.
Been talking to Channel 4 for it about it rather for a few years, and it was quite late in the process that because Channel 4 gave me my first big break a few years ago, I made with one of my best friends, Miles, I made a comedy called Lee and Dean, and then I wrote some other comedy and directed some other ones as well. It was kind of a case of Channel 4 going, we know you for comedy, so it's a bit of a hard sell, kind of saying he wants to make a documentary, a straight documentary about being sexually abused. But actually, putting the two together, although it wasn't what I intended to do originally, the more I thought about it, the more I spoke about it to people, the more it made sense for me, because I've spent my life laughing at really challenging things.
Mm-hmm.
And, maybe I'm not a psychologist. Maybe there's a bit of sort of denial or protecting myself in some of that. But actually, the thing that has got me through all of the difficult things that have happened to me has always been finding the lighter side and laughing at things where I can. That's always been the thing that's sort of taken the power out of these really horrible, dark things for me. And it's worked for me, laughter and comedy has been therapy for me and continues to be.
Absolutely. And that's something that Chris and I often say, doing our own podcast. You'll see us smiling as well. And we want to open these conversations up, which are, let's be honest, are challenging. They're heinous at times. But we also want to show that there is another side as well. And we're still standing here. And, laughter is the best medicine, they say as well. So I absolutely hear you there. And your blog, Chris, was really interesting. And I didn't know that Chris was actually writing it. So it was a surprise to me as well.
Ah, okay.
But I think many of the survivors that have contacted me about your sitcom, Mark, they were like, "Oh, I was a bit like you, Chris, first of all. Like, what is it going to be about?" And Bev and I just discussed before you came on that the actual sitcom made us both go, "Oh," it was really uncomfortable. But then when we watched the documentary behind the making of the sitcom, I was like, oh my God, what a genius. Oh my God, yeah, that really strikes a chord in me. And Bev, you thought the same, didn't you?
I did. And ironically, I watched the documentary first. And
Now that's really interesting, because I know some people who've watched it one way around and some that have watched it the other way around. It never occurred to me that people wouldn't watch the documentary first before the sitcom.
Right.
yeah,
Way Channel 4 broadcast it. And so when people started saying, well, I watched the sitcom, and then, like you, Chris,
mm,
then I watched the documentary and it made sense and I understood
Yeah.
it and I saw where it's all coming from. So now, a few months after it went out, when people say, which one should I watch first? I say, it's totally up to you. I don't know what is right. But something, I hope I've said it to you in person, Chris, is your blog was so interesting and so helpful, actually, to get a response from, and I got a response from her, but yours was so detailed and so thoughtful. It was great. It made me think a lot. It made the other the makers of the show think an awful lot. It was a really, really interesting and helpful thing for us.
Oh, thank you for that feedback. But where I was going with it is it gave the other survivors that I'm connected with the confidence to watch it, because
Mm.
when they first saw the title, they were like, how can someone be laughing at abuse, sexual abuse? I've been through that. How can someone laugh at that? And I went, no, 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 that's not what it's about. You need to watch it. It's actually bringing it to a wider audience to explain the nuances around what we've been through. And I said, as an educational piece, I said it's magic, really, because it's we reaching a wider audience and it's bringing out the conversations that we should all be having, that we well know, but other people don't know. So I applaud you on that, I really do. Bev, do you want to ask a question next?
yes, I do. I've got to say, the thing I most admire is your courage and fearlessness in putting the sitcom together. Because, as we're touching on the comedy side, as survivors, we hear comedians making jokes. Let's be frank, they make jokes about abuse, rape, and I find that it pushes my buttons. It's like
Yeah.
you're diminishing it, you're trivializing this experience, and yet your sitcom using that teddy bear. Wow, that absolute genius. Because, sorry,
I was just thinking really quickly that, it's something that I've spoken to people about an awful lot over the last couple of years, before making it and whilst we were making it and since. What is it okay to laugh at and who can laugh at what? And I get uncomfortable when people make jokes about very serious things that they have no personal experience of.
yeah,
But I think there is a difference when it's your thing and when it's something you've been through. I my parents both died when I was in my teens, and that was awful, absolutely
mm,
awful, to be kind of left without them so young. And I always thought I'd be really good, like in later years when my friends were losing their parents. I thought, oh, I'll
mm,
know what to do. I'll know what to say. I didn't. I was next to useless. The more it happened to friends of mine, the more I got into sort of a pattern of saying, you know what, you've got to do what is right for you. You've got to do what feels right for you. It's your thing. You're the person grieving. You're the person who's lost someone you love. Do what's right for you, whatever that is. And that's kind of how I feel about this as well. When something's happened to you, whatever it is, you deal with it how you want to deal with it. And to some people, it's going to be the last thing in the world they would want to do or think of doing. But as long as it isn't hurting anyone else, I think it's up to us how we deal with and how we process the things we've been through.
absolutely, absolutely. So, thinking about the teddy bear, and then the bit that I found very powerful there, not necessarily for the victims or survivors, it was about the education and awareness for others, your supporters, family, because how many times do we hear it? Oh, it couldn't be them. They're just too nice.
Yeah.
And by using that imagery of a teddy bear, it just, I think, well, for me personally and for others around me, they said, how clever was that?
There's a weird thing, and that is that wasn't actually my intention with the teddy bear. That was sort of a happy accident.
Right.
Happy being an odd word to use. But the reason for using something that wasn't human was because I didn't want the story to be about the abuser.
Mm.
I didn't, as an audience, because I'm a writer, that's what I do. And one of my jobs as a writer is to make my characters real and believable. And even if they're not nice people, I want my audience to care about what happens to them, because I think that's what makes a well-rounded character. You think about the shows you watch and you love, that have horrible, evil, nasty people in. The shows that are really good are the ones that make us go, yeah, they're awful, aren't they? But I sort of care
Yeah.
what happens to them as well. And I sort of wanted to do the opposite of this. I didn't want anyone in the story or anyone in the audience to be going down that very sort of natural route of going, what's going on in their head? Why are they doing this? What's led them to this point? I think that is a really important thing to look at. What is going on for perpetrators? What is happening in their heads? But this wasn't a time to do that. And
No.
that's the reason for using a sort of a non-human figure in that part. But so many people said to me then, as we were making it, the last thing in the world, a teddy bear, the thing that every child has that's smiling in the corner, and looking completely, lovely and comforting. So that was sort of an accident, but it's a good accident, I think.
Absolutely.
But
Chris.
it's all part of that grooming though, isn't it? It's like, the bear is associated with safety and comfort, yeah, and but the trust and the deception in the grooming. So it was a good way to show the safety in the teddy bear, but actually in this instance, the teddy wasn't safe. It was the
Yeah.
cause. So yeah, a lot of imagery going on there for me. So you mentioned that using comedy helps you feel like a victor and not a victim. Can we explore that a little bit with you, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, it it links really to what I was saying before, which is that
Yeah,
when I make jokes about things, when I find the funny in something, however sort of dark or uncomfortable it is, um, it's it's a bit like dragging it into a spotlight. And
yeah,
things in shadows, things in the darkness are scary, aren't they? We learn that as kids, when we don't want to have the light turned off in our room, or we don't want to be walking down a scary road at night by ourselves. I mean, I don't want to do that at the age of 47, to be honest. But um, when you drag something into the light, you can see it for what it is.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
so doing that with the sexual abuse that I suffered, um, it makes me feel empowered by doing that to it, by going, I mean, I've said this a few times. I feel like I was given this thing that I didn't want.
Yeah.
And if I have to have it, and I do have to have it, because when something like this happens to us, you never lose it, do you?
No.
no, no,
Sort of becomes part of you in a way. But if I have to have it as part of me, then I'm going to make it into something positive. I'm going to make it do something good in some way. And for me, that's what makes me feel kind of a bit victorious,
Yeah.
if
good.
you.
But I think what we've laboured on and what we really want to put across clearly, and I think we have now in so many different ways, is that our own lived experiences are our lived experiences, and we should be able to deal with them, portray them in the way that we want, whether it is through writing, public speaking, art, TV,
Yeah.
sitcoms, whatever it is that helps us deal with that trauma impact of all of the abuse that we've suffered, the way that we can verbalize it and get it out of our bodies so we're not living with the impact is the right way for every single one of us as individuals. And as I said in the blog, I ended it, I said, I've got my right way of doing it, Mark's got his right way of doing it, and neither way is wrong. So, and that's it, end of. So I'm
Yeah.
hoping that everybody listening to this podcast then expresses their pain in the way that is right for them, but hopefully opening up the conversations like your sitcom has done. Bev, over to you,
Yeah.
my love.
Completely with that. Yeah.
Well, the other things, I mean, there was lots that struck me, and I will be watching it again. I'm not going to lie, and I've been telling everybody about it, but I really felt for you watching the documentary. And I've got to say, for me, the documentary, I was with you every minute of it was very different to the sitcom. But when you were shooting the scenes, when you were doing the football, when you would take the football game and you were taking yourself back, I was thinking, your self-care must be absolutely amazing. How was that for you?
That's really interesting. I mean, I have, like many of us, I've done a lot of therapy for a very long time.
Yeah,
Done a lot of very traditional therapy, and in recent years, I've done some very non-traditional therapy. And so that has helped me an awful lot, obviously. Um, Channel 4 and Swan Films, who made the documentary, were and continue to be fantastic. They wouldn't let me do it until I'd spoken to, several times a psychologist, who was kind of assessing whether they felt I was sort of robust enough, strong
yeah,
enough to do it. And and I went into that thinking, well, I don't really need someone to tell me that I am. I know I am, but actually it was important.
yeah,
And it also meant that once that sort of connection had been established, it meant that that was a resource that was available to me throughout and is still available to me, actually.
good.
Um, when I'm when I'm working when I'm working creatively, I get into a really unusual sort of headspace. Whatever I'm doing, not just this project, but anything else that I
Yeah,
write, direct, or I'm in. Um, and it's a headspace that I love. I think it's a lot to do with the fact that it completely occupies my brain in a way that other things don't. When you get totally absorbed in something.
Mm.
It's to me when I do a jigsaw as well, actually. Your brain just goes to a slightly different sort of mode.
yeah,
And it happens to me when I'm working creatively, and it was happening there as well. So there was part of it that was just I was in work mode, actually, and I've directed a few things that I've also been in. It's a mad thing to do because you're sort of trying you're thinking about your performance, you're thinking about remembering the lines, you're also thinking about how it looks and whether that shot's going to match up with that one and if that's going to dovetail okay. So it's sort of exhausting in a really nice way. I suppose what I'm trying to say is, yeah, self-care is really important to me, has always been, and also lots of support was given to me, but I was also working in working mode and able to kind of switch some of that off as well.
yeah. And thank you for sharing that because people, I'm always talking about self-care. I think it's so important but it's often something that we have to learn because we don't know what self-care is initially. And so for anyone listening, you know, it's bringing that message home that self-care is so vital. And it's something that, you know, years ago, I remember doing some therapy and thinking, oh, yeah, I've done that. Thank you very much. Don't need to go back to that. And now, you know, Chris and I are proud to say that it's something that we still invest in. It is a big part of self-care and it's important.
And I
Well,
think
we can't do this job, can we, Bev, Mark? We can't do this work, talk about it, be in it, help other survivors if we don't do that self-care.
Absolutely.
I was just going to say, I think it's really easy for us, you know, whether or not we've had whatever diagnosis or whatever. I was diagnosed with PTSD. I know that's really common for abuse survivors. It's really easy for us to sometimes go, oh, I'm a bit rubbish, aren't I? You know, I'm not a great human for whatever reason. And I'm sure
Yeah.
whatever they've been through goes through that. But the other thing I've learned is to try to stop and go, Ashley, you're doing all right. You're doing more than
Yeah.
okay. Okay. Because not only are you doing good stuff, but you're doing it from the starting point of, you know, being wounded, being damaged by what's happened. So I think a bit of self-congratulation sometimes is important as well.
Absolutely.
100%. Now, one of the points you raised is how abuse affects not just the victim, but their loved ones. And it was really interesting to see those conversations between you and your wife and you and your friends. How did you choose to portray this in your show? And why is it important for our audiences to understand the bigger ripple effect of abuse, do you think?
So we know, but I guess, you know, people who don't have experience of this maybe don't fully appreciate that there are always going to be multiple victims of abuse, in that the person who is abused might be at the center of that hurt and that pain, but the people around them are also in those circles, aren't they? Because
They are.
it
Yeah.
affects so much as survivors. It affects our relationships, the way we are with people, the way we respond to things all the time. So it was a total no-brainer to have some of those conversations. My wife Jen, and I know so many people say to me, "Oh, that bit of the film really sort of got to me," you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
that conversation. Jen, we spoke about when it was first commissioned. We spoke about whether or not she wanted to do it, and she wasn't sure that she did. And you know, Jen is not an on-camera person at all. She's done lots of stuff off camera and behind the scenes, but it's so out of her comfort zone. And me and the director Joe, we put absolutely no pressure on her. We said, we'd love you to do this if you feel able to and you want to. And she did sort of go, you know, round in circles a little bit, thinking maybe I do, maybe no, actually I don't want to do it. And that was absolutely fine. In the end, she did decide she wanted to do it. And I'm so grateful to her, because that conversation in particular was, I mean, it was powerful in the moment, and I find it one of the most powerful bits of the film as well. And it's just honest. It really is,
Yes.
and authentic. You know, there's no clever editing. There's no, right, let's cut there. Actually, what about if you say that? There was none of that
Yeah.
going on. It was Joe Evans, who directed it, is fantastic. He's the most supportive, sensitive, funny, brilliant person to work with. And you know, what he does is he just kind of nudges you in the right direction and says, well, you know, let's film this. We'll see what happens. And
Yeah.
that was good. Do you reckon we could talk a bit more about this? You know, it's that kind of thing. It's never leading or anything like that. And that's what that conversation in particular was. I'm so pleased it's in the film, because, as I say, lots of people mention it to me.
And that's the impact that some people have no understanding that You know, when they say, oh, it happened years ago, don't need to talk about it now. You know, these are all different comments that we've all heard. But actually, it is the other people around us years later that are actually seeing and experiencing the impact for different reasons. And that is, you know, how does that feel, Mark, to have, you know, someone give you that honesty of their thoughts, their feelings to you, and support you in that moment?
It's everything, isn't it? You know, it's because the journey I've been on, especially over the last sort of 15 years, which is the time in which I reported what happened to me to the police, and it went to court and he went to prison, and, you know, he sort of fractured my family in half. You know, the idea of not having Jen and my friends around during all of that is hideous.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I'd have been able to do it. I'm not sure I'd have survived it. So it's wonderful, and I know not everyone has that. I know how important that is. And you know, it's one of the things that I hope the film has done. I know it's had a positive effect on lots of survivors who felt able to talk out about what happened to them. But I've also had lots of messages from people saying that I didn't really sort of understand what it looked like or sounded like or what it did to people, you know, just what we're
Yeah.
talking about. And if that makes one person reach out to someone that they know it's happened to
Yeah,
and be that
absolutely.
person for them, then I'll be so happy about that.
Absolutely. And you touched on it there, the fracture of the family, and it's something you talk about as well. Even though there was a conviction, even though there was evidence, you know,
Mm.
And proven in court, which, as we all know, is so rare to get that. And
Yeah.
yet there's still that level of disbelief from some members, family, friends. It couldn't have happened. You know, it didn't happen. I don't know about you, but I find that really hard to, you know, as a human being, it's like, what more evidence do you need to
Yeah.
accept this as for what it is?
But
Sorry, Chris, go on.
I'm sitting on my hands here, trying not to interrupt. I'm trying so hard. The fracture of the family, this is a big thing for many survivors because there is so much disbelief out there that this thing called child sexual abuse is just not that prevalent, is it? Well, it is,
Sadly.
unfortunately, and most of it does happen in the family home environment, as we know, as well as institutions. We know that. But even my other half, when I wrote my book, he didn't want to read the book, Mark, because he didn't want to be upset by it. But
Yeah.
I was like, until you actually read it and really understand what it is I've verbalized, you're not really going to understand me and the impact. And we've had to work through that ourselves. So we have got a positive, loving relationship, but I still feel that that bit of understanding of me is not there because he has not read my book. But we can't make other people step into our
No.
world and understand us and also be able to be there for us if they just can't do that. And I do accept that as well. So I had to take a lot of my stuff that I can't discuss within my home to the counsellor, to whoever, for me
Yeah.
to deal with it in that way. And, you know, so I think many survivors as well do expect the people around them to be able to pick up the pieces and have these conversations. But if that person probably doesn't feel that they can do that, then maybe are we asking too much? I don't know. But that is just the reality of some situations.
No, it's a really interesting point. Um, and it's understandable, isn't it? It's a tough thing to face for anyone.
Mm,
It's tough for us, obviously, but it's tough for people who like you say, you're their loved one, and the idea of
Yeah,
you being hurt in that way
yeah,
is just too difficult to face. And I get that, and I respect it. I don't know what the answer
no,
to it, uh, you know. Well, I do know what the answer to it is, and that is, improving the services that are out there, so there are
yeah,
always people that we can turn to.
yeah, 100%. Yeah. Now, your sitcom, sorry, touches on how professionals often use inappropriate and unhelpful language when dealing with
Ah,
survivors. What
Yeah.
do you think needs to change in the way professionals handle these conversations around abuse? And we've just had one of those little conversations.
So which bit? I'm trying to think. In the film, it's probably the barrister, is it?
Yeah, the barrister in the court and the way that they were grilling you. It's all the victim blaming language, isn't it?
Yeah, I I've since it happened, since the court case happened, I've been very conflicted about that, because I'm someone that I do believe in the justice system, and I
Yeah,
believe in the importance of it. And I think for the most part, it does a very good job. And when someone is accused of something, whatever it is, however we feel about it, that person deserves defense, and they deserve a robust defense, because that's the way we keep things safe for everyone. Because if we don't have that, then we have more unsafe convictions for whatever it is.
yeah.
So it's what I believe. That's one of my sort of core beliefs, I suppose. Um, but I mean, some of the things in the actual sitcom, in the court scenes, are real things that were said to me
Yeah.
by his defense team. And I what so I've said this before, and I think I say it in the documentary. It was like an attack. It
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
was like attacked. It was. I sort of naively thought, it's going to be robust. It's going to be difficult, but I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't expecting it to be an attack. I wasn't expecting to be actually called a liar, you know, to be told that I'm someone who makes things up. I don't know the
Mm-hmm.
truth from fiction, because of the job I do, for instance. Um, and I've lost my train of thought
No,
there.
it's just unhelpful or inappropriate language they might have used.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it. I don't know what the answer is really, because I'm not sure. This
but
is so
you're
difficult.
not the only survivor that says that it feels like an attack being in the courtroom though,
It
and
is
many of
maybe,
them. Sorry, Mark.
well, maybe there does need to be a bit more of a code, I suppose, a bit more regulation around what is said. I mean, the sad truth is there are, and it's not common, is it? But there are people who make stuff up as well. There are people who make things up,
But
and
that's the minimum.
it is, yeah,
And this is where I have to sit on my hands and compose myself, because it is the only crime where, as a victim, you have to prove you are not only a victim, that you are a credible witness. We
yeah,
don't do that
yeah,
for any other crime, and it just doesn't happen. So we're having to prove our innocence, have our life turned, and people don't realise this, even to go and make a statement to the police. I mean, I know things have changed now, but they want your mobile phone, they want access to your laptop, they want access to all your medical records, including your private counselling, to prove that you're credible.
I do that. I didn't realize
Shocking,
that. Yeah, I didn't know
shocking.
that.
Oh well, I signed mine over years ago. It has changed now, but
I,
it's shocking.
I
They
just want,
still use. Sorry.
clear. I just want to be clear about what I said before. I'm not for a second suggesting that it's right or good the way it happens. I'm not. I know it sounds like I'm defending.
Oh, you're not. You're not coming across like that.
I believe that the system has to be robust.
Yeah.
I also know from talking to the police a few years later, the detectives who worked on my case, they said to me, it was the first time I'd spoken to them about it because I was researching the documentary. And they said, oh, I said about what happened in the court case. They said, yeah, because, you by that point, you were a 35-year-old man, in a suit who was quite successful, so the barrister's job in that situation was to get you to get it to make you angry, and defensive, and to say, and then to turn to the jury and say, "Are we this person here? What? He's a victim, is he? Look at him in his suit. He's we know what he's done in his sort of career and everything, and he's a victim. You're telling me he's a victim? Doesn't make sense to me. It's a game, isn't it? Sadly,
Yeah.
game." And I wish it didn't happen. I don't know what the answer is to make it play out differently, really.
Well, they've bought Operation Satyrian now, which means they're looking at it through the lens of the victim more. And they are really the police are, I don't know about the CPS and the court system, but they're trying to really make sure that they cause no further harm through the process of the criminal justice system for victims and survivors. So I know there is a lot of work going on, but I also hear story after story from victims and survivors about their actual process and their experience going into that court, and it just sounds horrific.
Well, and something my wife has said to me more than once is, when I say what I've just said here about, it needs to be robust, she said, yeah, but you're a fairly together, grown man with a big support network around you. What about those people who haven't got that? And she's absolutely right. It's I had the tools and the resources and the support to help me through it. Not everyone has that.
Absolutely. And that leads us on nicely to the next question, Mark. You mentioned about having doubts about the sitcom and feeling scared about potential backlash or further emotional, that's all right, I'm reading this out, harm. What helped you push through those fears? And what advice would you give to others who are thinking of sharing their story but are hesitant?
Yeah, I didn't. It's weird. I don't think I had those fears when we started making it, and they really they started to grow a little way into it, and they hit a peak in the conversation with Ian Lee, in the documentary, which was a brilliant, brilliant conversation. I'm so grateful to him for being a part of it. And then I had quite a long period of time thinking, what if I've made a huge mistake here, putting myself out there and sharing this? What if I've made a mistake for me personally and emotionally? What if, because we all know it's quite small, it feels, but there is a backlash, a sort of trauma backlash, an anti-trauma sort of movement out there, and it's part of the anti-woke thing, isn't it? That, oh, these people, having to tell their stories, in front of us, making a big thing of it. I think I actually sort of felt that, but maybe at a low level for the almost a year between finishing filming it and it being shown. I think I had that sort of inside me. But then all of that went away when the first reviews started coming out about a week before. And we were getting contacted by journalists from all the papers. And the response was so positive. I knew the show, I knew it was good, and I knew it was important, and I knew the message of it was important. But to hear that from other people was really, really great for me, and I remember sort of a few days before it came out thinking, I think this is going to be okay. And then as it came out and the response was so overwhelmingly positive, that turned into, oh, we've done a good thing here and this is already helping people. and that's good. To people who, haven't maybe spoken out about what's happened to them, I suppose there are two sort of strands here, aren't there? There is the reporting it strand, and I have total respect for everybody who reports what happened to them to the authorities, and sort of tries to get things to happen that way. That's what I chose to do. But increasingly, I have respect for people who choose not to do that, because I think sometimes there's a bit of, well, why haven't they reported it, or why did it take them so long? And until you've been through it and the toll it takes on you and people around you and every facet of your life, you can't appreciate what it's like. You can't appreciate how overwhelming it is. So I would say, it's got to be right for you to do that. It's got to feel right. And if it doesn't, nobody has the right to push you to do it or to tell you you must do it, or it's wrong if you don't. I spent so many years, like many people, thinking, what if he's doing it to someone else because I haven't reported it? But I had to remind myself constantly, I am not to blame for that.
Yeah.
I'm not the person choosing to do those things.
Yeah.
And then the other side is doing something with it. Like I've done, I've told my story, you've told your story, Chris. Lots of people have, in different ways. And I think any sharing of it that we're able to do, I didn't appreciate how useful that was for other survivors until now. And it makes me sort of doubly pleased that I've done it. I hoped it would be, but I didn't realize it would be so much. Some of the work I'm doing now, all about making lemonade, Chris, is all about taking the difficult things that have happened to us, whatever they are. For some of us, that's sexual abuse, but for other people, it's other traumatic or challenging or difficult things, and turning that negative into something positive, whatever it is, and whatever it looks or sounds like. There's no right or wrong answer to it. That's what my podcast is about. I'm talking to people who've been through all sorts of things. Some things that I find completely unimaginable, and find it really difficult to try to. Well, I can empathise, but I don't know what they've been through. I don't know what it feels like. But to hear what they've done with it, and what good things they're making come out of the bad, is really, really inspiring.
And you've wrapped it up really nicely, because sadly we are coming to the end. But before we come to the end, we always like to have last thoughts. So Mark, would you like to share the name of your podcast? And of course, we'll put the link in underneath anyway. But also your last thoughts for anyone watching or listening to this podcast.
Okay. Well, and thank you so much for having me. I've loved talking to you both. So Making Lemonade is the name of the podcast. It's going to be coming out. I think it's looking like November. So in a few weeks' time, start releasing episodes, and I've already recorded some amazing interviews with people. And there's also a website, which is www.makinglemonade.uk, not .co.uk, just .uk. That's the website that I've set up for it as well. And yeah, the last thoughts, and I didn't know you were going to ask this, but I'm really pleased you have. There are 4 words that I heard said out loud. And when I say that, I've heard these words before, because we talk, don't we? And 47 years of having conversations with people, of course I've heard the words. And I've heard this sentence before, but I'd never heard it in this context. When I first heard them in this context, I realized no one had ever said them to me at any point in the last, nearly 40 years since it first happened to me. And the first time I heard them was me saying them whilst about halfway through a therapeutic psilocybin treatment in the Netherlands last December, which, if you don't know, that is what's in magic mushrooms. And in lots of countries, not the UK at the moment, you can go and do it in a therapeutic setting with therapists there leading you through it. It's the most incredible thing. And I recorded the whole thing on a little audio recorder because I'm going to put that out as a podcast at some point. But I said, I remember saying it at the time, but then I listened back to it a few days later, and the power of it really hit me. Those 4 words were, "It shouldn't have happened." And they're so simple and so obvious. And when we know something like this has happened to someone, of course, of course we're thinking that's bad, that shouldn't have happened. But to actually say them or to hear them as a survivor was for me ridiculously powerful. And I thought, why did no one ever say that to me? Why did no one ever just say, Mark, it shouldn't have happened. What happened to you shouldn't have happened. And actually, even saying it to myself feels good and feels powerful. So my last thought for other survivors is to try and say it to yourself.
Yeah.
And to say it and believe it, because it is true. Whatever happened to you shouldn't have happened. And it's a simple thing, but it's good to remind ourselves.
Simple things are most powerful. Chris, what's your final thoughts? And I know you're frustrated that we finished, but we're running out of time.
Hour.
I know.
We can do it again sometime, can't we? We can have another one.
Yes, please.
If you have me back.
Of course we'll have you back. God, I've loved this conversation. I just think that you are amazing. You've done something really good to shine a light on this horrible crime in a way that is more understandable for many other people in society. And I just want to wish you all the best. And I just didn't know whether you wanted to say about the Survivors Trust, Mark, or not.
Oh, yeah, no, I'll be in trouble that I haven't said that, won't I? Yeah, well, I'm so pleased. I mean, I've made contact with or been contacted by so many people and so many organizations since the documentary aired, and one of them is the Survivors Trust, and it's through their conference a few weeks ago that we met, Chris, isn't it? Even though we'd sort of spoken online before, and one of the things that I'm most sort of honored by and proud of that have come out of this whole thing is being asked to be an ambassador for the Survivors Trust. It's such an honor. I'm so pleased to be able to sort of take part and to do my bit where I can with them. And they, like so many other organizations, do incredible work. And I also want to say I think you are both amazing for the work you do. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you. And as anybody listening knows or watching, if you've got any questions, if you have any feedback, please feel free to contact us. You can email us at breakingthestepforward@gmail.com. Just wanted to get that out of the way. Mark, I can't thank you enough for your time. We do, as we always say, we've run out of time, but we do have to be very aware. You've got things to do as well. But thank you so much in your honesty, in your courage, and also for your creativity and imaginary. Because if someone hasn't watched it, please watch it. So
Channel
thank
4.
you. Channel 4, My Sexual Abuse. There's the sitcom and the documentary. So on the last note, thank you, goodbye, and speak again.
Bye, everyone. See you soon. Bye.
Bye.